There is a version of Jordan Peterson that millions of people know, the clinical psychologist standing at a podium, calm and deliberate, unpacking Carl Jung and Dostoevsky with the certainty of a man who has wrestled with the darkest questions and come out the other side with answers. That version built lecture halls full of people seeking direction, sold tens of millions of books, and reshaped the way a generation thought about responsibility, suffering, and meaning. But there is another version of Jordan Peterson unfolding right now, and it looks nothing like that. It is quieter, harder to watch, and far more complicated. And for the people who followed him most closely, it raises questions that none of his books fully prepared them for. To understand where Peterson is now, you have to go back further than most people realize. His health struggles did not begin with any single dramatic event. They accumulated over years, quietly beneath the surface of his expanding public profile. Around 2016, he was prescribed clonazepam, a benzodiazepine, to help manage anxiety. At the time, the dosage was low and the reasoning was clinical, but as years passed and the pressures of his life intensified, particularly when his wife Tammy was diagnosed with kidney cancer, that dosage increased significantly. What followed was a dependency that would eventually demand an enormous price. By 2019, Peterson's situation had deteriorated to the point where withdrawal from the medication triggered a condition called akathisia. This is not a term most people are familiar with, but those who have experienced it describe it in terms that are almost impossible to overstate. Akathisia is a neurological and movement disorder characterized by an intense, uncontrollable inner restlessness, a feeling of needing to move constantly combined with an almost hallucinogenic level of psychological distress. His daughter Michaela Peterson described it as feeling like severe restless legs, but throughout the entire body, causing an almost hallucinogenic stress response. For Peterson, the symptoms were severe enough to be life-altering. Michaela said her father experienced terrible akathisia, an incredible, endless, irresistible restlessness bordering on panic, which made him suicidal. Unable to find adequate treatment options in North America, the family made the difficult and controversial decision to travel to Russia, where doctors placed him into a medically induced coma in an attempt to manage his benzodiazepine dependency. The procedure was extraordinary and not without risk. He developed severe pneumonia during the process, compounding an already critical situation. He survived, but the recovery that followed was long and uncertain, requiring months of rehabilitation in Serbia before he was stable enough to return to public life. When he did eventually resurface, gaunt and visibly changed, it was clear that the man who had once spoken with such commanding energy had been through something that had cost him dearly. Many observers hoped the worst was behind him. It was not. The next chapter of his health story began not with a medication crisis, but with something far more mundane, and yet, in his case, potentially catastrophic. In August 2025, Peterson was diagnosed with chronic inflammatory response syndrome, known as CIRS, following exposure to mold. CIRS is a condition in which the immune system essentially becomes dysregulated after exposure to certain biotoxins, primarily mold, triggering a cascade of inflammatory responses throughout the body. For most people, mold exposure is an inconvenience. For individuals with a particular genetic susceptibility, it can become a systemic illness affecting multiple organs and systems simultaneously. Peterson, it appears, fell into that latter category. According to Michaela, his condition became significantly worse after cleaning out his late father's basement, which the family believes may have triggered a severe reaction. What came next was alarming in its speed. The illness quickly worsened, leading to pneumonia and sepsis, which required emergency hospitalization. Peterson spent nearly a month in the ICU, experiencing severe neurological complications, and was described by his family as being near death. Sepsis is not a condition that announces itself gradually. It is a systemic infection response that can become fatal within hours if not treated aggressively. The fact that Peterson was dealing with it while already weakened by CIRS and the lingering effects of his prior neurological history made his situation extraordinarily precarious. And As if that were not enough, his daughter Michaela was simultaneously managing a crisis of her own. Her newborn daughter required urgent medical attention due to complications related to pulmonary hypertension. The family was being pulled in multiple directions at once, facing emergencies on parallel tracks with no time to breathe between them. By October 2025, Peterson had left the ICU but remained hospitalized until December when he was finally discharged. His daughter released updates throughout that period, asking for prayers and urging patience. He's still not doing well, but he's not doing as badly as he was. Michaela said in a video posted to X, adding, "I'm hopeful he will recover with time. I wish things would just go back to normal, but they're not there yet." Those words, measured and honest, gave some sense of the emotional weight the family was carrying. This was not a recovery story with a clear finish line. It was an open-ended situation with no guarantee of resolution. Then, in April 2026, something shifted again. Michaela released what she described as a detailed and, at times, tearful video update, one that many who followed Peterson's story found difficult to watch. She revealed that her father was battling akathisia again, describing what she called an old neurological injury that had been re-triggered by the combination of stress, physical illness, and environmental factors he had endured throughout 2025. The return of akathisia after years of absence was not something the family had anticipated, and its reappearance appears to have hit harder than before. "Akathisia is the worst thing I've ever seen anyone go through." "That sounds dramatic, but it's true," Michaela said. "This has been unbelievably hard on my family. Every day for the last year has been hell." She described the condition as causing intolerable discomfort that makes people want to crawl out of their skin, noting that it is a neurological injury that many people do not survive, with no quick fix available. She was also candid about something broader, that neurological injuries caused by psychiatric medications are far more common than most people realize, that they are frequently misdiagnosed, and that they receive insufficient attention from the medical establishment. "Neurological injuries from psych meds are far more common than people know," she said. "They're not talked about enough, they're misdiagnosed, nearly impossible to treat, and hidden by the pharmaceutical industry." Whether one agrees with every dimension of that framing or not, her core point, that Peterson is suffering from something real, serious, and poorly understood, is not in dispute. As of early 2026, Peterson is recovering at home in Arizona. He has not returned to the ICU and has avoided further hospitalization since his December 2025 discharge. Recovery remains slow and challenging, with ongoing neurological issues and inflammation being treated by a team of specialists. Michaela has described the process as a marathon, emphasizing that progress is gradual. His 2026 speaking tours, including planned appearances at major venues, have been canceled. The professional machinery continues. Peterson Academy, which he and Michaela co-founded in 2024, now offers 70 courses and a newly launched mobile app, with Michaela managing day-to-day operations while her father participates in a more limited capacity, watching the courses from home. But Peterson himself is no longer the one actively driving things forward in the way he once did. That alone says something significant. There is an unavoidable tension in all of this when you hold it up against what Peterson spent decades teaching. His central argument, built across thousands of hours of lectures, 2 major books, and countless public appearances, was that suffering is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be confronted. That meaning comes not from avoiding hardship, but from choosing to carry it with integrity. He argued that the structures people build around themselves, routines, responsibilities, commitments, are what allow them to endure when chaos arrives. He was not offering optimism. He was offering something harder and more durable than that. He was saying that the world is genuinely difficult and that the only honest response is to face it directly. Now that philosophy is being tested not in a lecture hall or a podcast studio, but in a hospital room and a home recovery, far from the public eye. The man who counseled millions to bear their suffering and keep moving is himself navigating a situation where discipline and intention can only do so much. Akathisia does not respond to willpower. CIRS does not lift because you set your room in order. Sepsis does not negotiate. These are conditions that impose themselves on a person regardless of their intellectual framework or their commitment to personal responsibility. And that is not a criticism of Peterson or his ideas. It is simply a recognition that there are limits to what any philosophy can promise. What this period reveals, perhaps more than anything else, is the human being behind the public figure. For years, Peterson's critics accused him of presenting himself as invulnerable, of building an image that left little room for fragility. His supporters saw something different, a man who was unusually willing to speak about his own darkness, his depression, his fears, his family's struggles. Both observations may contain some truth, but what is happening now strips away the debate entirely. There is no ideological angle to a man lying in intensive care. There is no cultural argument to be made about a family watching a father suffer through something that has no easy name and no guaranteed cure. His daughter, for her part, has handled these updates with a kind of raw honesty that has earned respect even from people who hold complicated feelings about her father's legacy. She has not offered false reassurance. She has not performed optimism. She has said, plainly, that this has been the hardest year of her family's life and that she does not know when or whether things will return to what they were before. That uncertainty is where Jordan Peterson's story currently sits, not resolved, not concluded, but suspended in a difficult and unscripted present. His books still sell. His ideas still circulate in conversations about meaning and responsibility. But the man himself is somewhere quieter, working through something that none of his rules quite cover, and doing so, as far as anyone can tell, without the cameras, without the crowds, and without a clear answer waiting at the end.